All right, so good evening, everybody, for episode number 3 of the Unlock Your Culture webcast. We've got myself, Mark Alone, and Sean Duffy here. Hopefully, Pablo will be joining us in a little bit. I tried to send him a link. And of course, we have our amazing guest from the scenic white north, Mike Bernard, who's going to join us tonight. So I get a feel we're going to talk about quite a bit. So I'm going to kind of save some of the BS tonight and just give you a little background how we got here and get going with it. So if anybody watched episode 2 last week, we kind of had a little, shoot from the hip episode after, our guest had some mission stuff to take care of. And somehow we got down the rabbit hole of the volunteer fire service. So we thought it would be a good idea to come back this week with somebody who is well versed in it and maybe kind of talk about the volunteer side, mainly because I think for a lot of us, especially those of us who teach, a lot of stuff comes from the career mindset. And that's something I'm going to try to dive in with Mike here after he introduces himself. But the bulk of the fire service is still volunteer, but I think probably, unless I'm being ignorant, one of the most underrepresented sections of the fire service in many ways. So hopefully we'll have a good conversation tonight. If you guys got questions, as usual, you can drop them in the chat box. Sean's going to kind of monitor that and interject as usual. We're going to try to stay 60 to 90 minutes with our usual after recording sidebar if we get to that point. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean, whatever he's got, and then we'll let Mike introduce himself and get rolling.
All right, I don't have too much. I kind of want to respect everybody's time. So I know the last one I missed. So for those who may not know, I'll just introduce myself real quick. Sean Duffy. I work for the City of Venice here in Southwest Florida. Also co-founder of Build Your Culture. Kind of piggyback off what Mark said. Before we started tonight, we started inviting you guys in. Mike and I had a good conversation. And one of the things that we want to just really kind of touch on tonight is the debate that's we see that's really prevalent today of career versus volunteer and everybody arguing over that. So we're going to start off with that after Mike introduces himself, and we're kind of segue from there. One thing I do, as every show we do, your input is valuable. That's why we're all here. So please don't hesitate, ask questions, get involved, and then we just keep the conversations going from there. So this is all for you guys. So anything we can do, that's what we're here for. And go ahead, Mark.
To piggyback on that real quick too, I know people have issues with work getting this being recorded and stuff. So if you want to send a private message on here to myself or Sean, and we can ask the question from, Jane Doe in Italy wants to know, we'll protect your identity. We don't want anybody to go without information because they, might get in trouble at work. As sad as that sounds, it's reality. So if you can't speak up, we get it. That's cool, but we will find a way around and get your questions answered. So cool. You good with that, Sean?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm going to let Mike go ahead and introduce himself, and then we'll get rolling.
Well, thanks, guys. So for everybody who doesn't know me, my name is Mike Bernard. I am from northern Wisconsin. It has been snowing here for days. So for those of you in the south who are experiencing heat, it's not here anymore. It's the lows of 20s. It's been beautiful, but makes splitting wood a little bit harder. I work on a department in a very tourist-based area. So our year-round population for our overall area is probably about 10 to 15,000 based on most economic impact studies that we do here for people who come from Chicago and really any other state. We have a multiplier on any given weekend at high peak tourist times to 10 to 12. So we're experiencing population increases to the 100,000 mark. And what's unique about the county that I'm in is we're exclusively volunteer. We have all paid on call departments, or they're receiving some type of stipend for that. We do have paramedic based ambulances that run out of the hospital that are paid. What's unique about my department is exclusively volunteer. So we receive no reimbursement for calls. We receive no reimbursement for training or our normal business meeting nights. And we hold our people highly accountable to stuff. And we do quite a bit. We're training every single week. We're doing maintenance checks. We're doing truck checks. We're encouraging people to do continuing education, things like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with my department. I'm also an instructor with Midwest Fire Tactics and Training, and we're kind of based out of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, northern Wisconsin, and travel accordingly based on where we get invited to. And we're also part of the cadre with the Oath Keepers Fire Conference in Ohio. So a little bit about me and my area. If you have any other questions or anything about that, or what we do, or what it's like to pump out of frozen lakes, please feel free to throw those up in the chat. But otherwise, I can kick it back over to Sean and we can get this rolling.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Mike. So, like I said beforehand, there's a great debate of career versus volunteer. And I just want to put it out there that those are things that are individuals' mindsets. I don't really think that that's a thing as far as volunteers and careers absolutely having this beef with one another. All right. I think sometimes people tend to forget where they came from on certain issues, and that might be part of the problems. But ultimately, it's about professionalism, right? And it doesn't matter if you're paid or if you're volunteer. You're the one that creates that professional atmosphere. You're the one that goes to classes and gets that knowledge and passes that on. So it really shouldn't matter where you're from or what background you're from. If you're here to make the fire service better, and you're here to just pass on things that have been passed on to you, and serve the citizens like you said you would, then that's really where we need to be placing our focus, not in these little bickering matches that really make no difference. In fact, the only thing they tend to do is drive a wedge in the fire service and pull us further from our mission. So I just want to ask, Mike, how do you deal with that? If you see that, do you have any of those issues where you're at, or when you go around teaching? Do you experience any of those where people might discredit you a little bit because of your background?
It's actually interesting. One of the questions that I get quite a bit is when I travel a lot, even when I'm not teaching. I like to tell everybody, at the end of the day, I'm a nobody from nowhere, and I'm a student of the craft. So whether you see me out there teaching or whether you see me out there participating, I'm only there to make myself better so I can bring it home to make my crews better, make my command staff better, and in the end, serve the people better. I think that I can really say without a doubt, it goes back to the personal mindset of people with the career versus volunteer debate. And I want to say, like, as a spectrum goes, it's the same thing with politics, whether you're on this side of the coin or this side of the coin. You have the people that are both within the career and volunteer service that are going to be on the one side of the coin that are just hell bent on, hey, we're volunteers, we don't get paid, we're doing the same job, and they're kind of pushed off into one direction, where you have the career guys in the same aspect where it's like, well, you're just volunteers. Going to the middle of the road people, those are kind of your fence riders. Those are going to be your people that, they're there to work, they're there to do the job, they've got a little bit of buy-in, and it's kind of like, well, whatever, maybe I could go to lazy boy, maybe I could train more. And then you got your people that are bought in, that are super passionate. And I really truly think that whether you're career or volunteer, with as much of the trainings that I go to and travel, I talk to guys who are career guys, and this always baffles me. You get everything paid for, and you can go to, let's say, FDTN. It's all paid for. You just got to take days off for it. And guys won't take days off because it's overtime. And, oh, well, I got to get paid overtime, or I got to get paid to do this or get paid to do that. It's insane to me, because out of pocket, I'm paying to go to this stuff to make myself better, and to be given the opportunity where, maybe I had a bigger training budget at my department that they could pay to send me to this stuff. I think it's crazy. So I think regardless of where you're at, we all have our own personal Mount Everest. And for me, my Mount Everest, my philosophy with it is I'm never going to reach the pinnacle of it, because like Sean and I were talking a couple weeks ago, like, he does drags one way, and he saw how we were doing drags at one of the conferences, and we just started talking about it. It's apples to apples, apples to oranges, but like that communication on how we can work with each other and piggyback off of each other to have new ideas and different techniques and things like that. It's a never ending quest. And it doesn't matter with, the volunteer career debate. I really don't think it means that, because at the end of the day, I have to work twice as hard because I'm not as blessed to be at a fire department training every single day or every single shift. And, I had to start small. I am not some super duper guy that gets to work on a truck company or an engine company that drills every single shift and they're running 20 or 30 calls. They're stretching a lot, they're doing this or that, or they're throwing ladders to the building. So I have to put it on myself. If I have an extra 10 or 20 minutes, I can fly down to the department and I can throw ladders. I can fly down to the department and work on my mask up drills. And it's off-putting to some of those people who are going to be your naysayers, but I've had a couple policies made about me in the day, and I still have some being made about me as we go along. So, I didn't get to where I was being quiet about it. I'm super passionate about it. I've learned how to talk to people better about it, but you have to take that passion, that motivation, and you have to keep pushing it towards those people slowly, because eventually you bleeding that into them enough, eventually you're going to be asked as that asset what to do. And I'm very fortunate and blessed that my fire chief and I have been really getting along on the same page, and we're doing really good things, and we're starting to get into that more aggressive mindset. And for our department, it really warms my heart as a volunteer department that we go to fires and people are like, boy, that was pretty aggressive that you did that. And it's like, but that's how you put the fire out, whether you're doing a vertical vent, whether you're aggressively attacking the fire from the interior and being very smart about with your tactics and your training is solid. That's just what firefighting is. And I take special exception that, oh, well, volunteers are just foundation savers, or, oh, thank God you saved the basement today. You know what? I hate to say it, when my crew rolls up on a fire, regardless of the time that we've been working on it, our primary options to go interior, our primary options to go offensive whenever feasibly possible, get our primary searches done. And again, you think about it, like I had a medical call the other night. I literally left my house and it took me 18 minutes just to drive to the middle of nowhere for this medical call. And I mean, that's not even, some of the major outskirts that we can get. So you think about that. If I have to respond to a fire and I got to go to the station, we get apparatus, we hold ourselves to a very, the best accountability that we can with our response times. We shoot to be out of the door with apparatus in 5 minutes or less from the time of the page. So we're trying to get on scene. We're trying to put an aggressive hit on the fire. But again, if I've got a 15-minute drive time, you got to think about where your building conditions are at that point. And again, you make it what it is. I mean, if you're going to look at that and say, we're only defensive, we're never going to get in, we're never going to search the building, we're never going to do that, man, I really feel like you're doing a disservice to your people. I really do. But again, it goes back to that professionalism and that mentality. I mean, there are people out there. You look at my geographical area, we're two of the oldest counties in the state of Wisconsin. There's some departments just by design that they only have volunteers that are 50, 60, 70 years old. And yeah, they're there, they're getting trucks to steam, but they're not air pack people. I mean, it's just not reality for them. And trying to get these younger people involved and younger people excited about it is that culture that you're building into it, whether it is a career department or a volunteer department. Everything's culture, and it's how you're going to push stuff, and it's how you're gonna be. And at the end of the day, like in one of the workshops that I teach, I always like to say there's no pride in being an asshole. And my big thing with that is, like, if that's the part of the department that I'm a part of, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to smudge out this group of people or our new people or whatever, I really don't have any interest in that. I think that we can be better, and I think that we can build people up and can collectively work together regardless of what your job description is.
Oh, great points. All great points. Mark, you got anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of piggyback on your question because my first one kind of goes with it. So one of the things I see a lot, Mike, is that the double standards, I think, between the career and volunteer side on both ends, right? And we always talk about what we just kind of touched on, where, the career guys are putting down the volunteer guys and, oh, the pancake breakfast and all this, haha, funny crap, right? When in reality, most of the people I know that are on their career side got in volunteered somewhere, right? But I think what we don't talk about enough, because it's a hard conversation and it's going to hurt a lot of feelings when I say this, is the flip side of that with the volunteers that say, well, we're just volunteers. We can't go training. We can't meet that standard. We don't have the time. Boohoo for us, because we have jobs. And, you know, like, I get it. Like, I respect that. I've done it. I still volunteer to this day. It's very hard to have a full-time job and to go to your volunteer fire department and meet the training requirements, which in many cases are getting a little excessive for both sides of the coin. But what would you say about that flip side, where I think, you know, it's a victim mentality sometimes instead of a step up mentality?
Excuses. In my opinion, excuses are lies. You know what? I have 3 kids. My family actually owns 2 separate family businesses. I work part-time as well. I've got the fire department. I am the president of our hockey board in town. And one of the things we always talk about is like, find me another person that is equally as busy and is doing as much as that's not showing up on almost every single call. It's your commitment level, it's your passion. And again, if you're truly here for the right reasons and you're not here to just wear a pager and get a sweet looking t-shirt and a belt buckle, you're in it. You're in it. And to be passionate about it and have that complete buy-in from people, I think is extremely important. And I think that's where our department does a really good job with that, because I think with the volunteer departments, and I'll just speak to that from now, for now, the volunteer departments that have no accountability and no expectations of their members. You know, like in Wisconsin, we've got our entry level courses, we've got our certified fire courses. You know, you have a lot of departments that just say, well, hey, you passed entry level, that's good enough. That's all you need. Come on, we just need people. Well, what's your expectation of that? You're not pushing to want your people to go to the highest levels possible. You're not pushing your people until a state mandate comes out or something comes out from a training and it says, hey, we're now requiring that you all go to this. We're now requiring that you up your training. And then you got guys that have been in the volunteer service for 10, 15, 20 years going, I've never needed that cert. It's always been this one way. Why would we have to do any differently? Well, it's the culture that's built into it. Why would you have any type of why would you have any type of issue with like going to more classes and just improving yourself and being better when the opportunity is there? I mean, you know, you look at our department's paying for everything. Our department's pushing people to go to continuing education, and that's where we are with our SOPs. You look at our SOPs and we have requirements as basics, certified firefighters. So state of Wisconsin certifications, we have minimum requirements for driver operator. We have all this stuff. And as a volunteer department, we hold people accountable that if they're not going to be coming to calls, if they're not going to be doing more stuff, we kick them off. Because if you're just going to be filling the spot where you're not going to come to calls and you're not going to participate in stuff, how can you hold that expectation that when everybody gets in the back of the engine and I'm sitting next to so-and-so who hasn't showed up to training in 6 months, that they're going to have any idea what we're doing? That's not okay. So, you know, when you look at it, I think it's BS. And we went through that in Wisconsin with a new law that we had where it required everybody to go to higher levels of training and have certain minimums with a couple of things. Oh my God, you would have thought the world exploded, because all these people were sitting there and they're saying, well, how can we expect our guys to go this? And how can we expect them to do this? Well, I'm sorry. At our department, it's like, well, we got 3 people that we got to make sure are up to date on this. It's the culture. It's how you're doing it. I mean, we're even talking at our department on how we can start our physical testing so that we have annual physical tests and, you know, have green, yellow, and red guys on based on what their air pack qualifications are going to be and based on where we need to know where they're going to be, whether they're going to be better for driving or a support type of aspect on the fire ground, or if they can be an interior firefighter and cleared for duty with that. I mean, why not? If we're doing the same job, why aren't we holding ourselves, especially in the volunteer world, to a higher accountability level? Same thing with officers. The popularity contests where we vote because, oh, Bob's the best one and he's been here for 20 years. And you know what? Bob's a really nice guy. Let's vote for him for chief. Well, what if Bob doesn't have the training requirements? What if Bob's never gone to any continuing education classes? It's the same thing when we did our SOP rewrite. We've created a promotional kind of stepping stone where we have our entry level requirements for our line firefighters and then our lieutenants, captains, and so on and so forth. We now have basic requirements on what, your classes are going to have to be to get to that. So you're pushing people to say, hey, if you ever want to be an officer on the department, here are the base requirements even to be considered for the job. Again, like I said, if we go back to the whole, we're doing the same job, then why not have the same type of requirements that you would for a career?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch on something that you said, actually two things that you said, because it makes sense. So you hit on accountability, and I've always gone off this basic principle of accountability is everything, right? If you have accountability, then that's going to breed responsibility. And if you have responsibility, then that breeds ownership. Once you have that ownership, and that's like the best asset that anyone can offer, right? And then with passion, you have to understand that like passion is really the true leader, not the individual themselves. And a lot of people, like you were saying, with the whole, well, Bob's been here X amount of years and he's a really good guy. That's fine. But that doesn't mean anything to me anyway, because passion is something that experience can't teach. You either have it or you don't. And with people on the career side and the volunteer side who merely just show up, they do the bare minimum that's required of them, and they go about their day, and there's minimal investment, that gives you minimal return. So that's not the person that I want leading me. It's certainly not the person that I'm going to ever go to for advice or anything like that. So when we're talking about all that, it's really about leading from the front, right? Like, set that example, show them why this is important, and show up, do a good job, keep escalating that, right? Get your education, do all these things that you need to do. And don't just do it because there's a promotion coming up. Do it because you actually give a shit, right? And that's the biggest thing. I think a lot of people, they lay dormant, and then all of a sudden something happens, and now their interest is piqued because either A, they don't want to do this one thing that they're now going to be expected to do, so their ticket out of that is furthering their education and getting a promotion, or B, they want that more money on the career side. Oh, there's promotion, so that's more money, or that title. A lot of people, man, they don't care about that job per se. They just want that title because they feel like that gives them some type of power, right? Well, I'm the lieutenant, or I'm the driver engineer, or whatever that title is. That's great, but with that comes a certain level of responsibility, and Mark touches on that too. Mark has a thing about professional dementia, and if he wants to elaborate on that, I'll go ahead and let him do that. But the longer that we're in it, we can't just assume that just because we've been taking up a seat for 20 plus years that we're actually worth it.
Yeah, I loved how you answered it, Mike. I couldn't agree more. If it's the same job, then it's the same job, right? And it's the same on the career side, right? Don't say your job is this, oh, well, it's the same job as the guys in the big city, 20 miles down the road, but we're so small and we don't have the staff in. And again, same cries, right? Boo-hoo for us. We can't be them, but it's about effort. And like you said, it's about passion, right? It's about commitment. So you're going to give them what you put out. Maybe you don't have the same amount of people or the same amount of stuff or the nicest equipment, but that, most of what we do on the fire ground doesn't really have much to do with that, right? It's about small unit teams completing an objective, right? And that doesn't care what you get paid. It doesn't care how big your department was or, how long it took you to get there. You have a job to do, get there and do it. I won't take up too much time with the promotional dementia, but just, basically, people forget where they came from essentially, right? You move up that ladder, and the higher you get, the harder it is to see the ground sometimes, and you start making yourself believe that, oh, well, and I'm at this level, nobody understands what it's like to be the battalion chief or, on the admin side or the fire investigation side or in training. And, because I made these promotions, I know more than everybody else. And that's true to a point. You should have some kind of knowledge to get there. And there is a time and a place to stop pulling hose. But, I think we have to remember too, that promotion is supposed to come with more responsibility and not less. And while that may look different from the line firefighter, at the end of the day, everything you do as you move up turns around and making that line firefighter's job easier. And I love what you hit on too with the volunteer officer thing. I don't know, have a better solution, but I've always thought it was interesting how it's an election based on no qualifications a lot of the time. It's just, it's so-and-so's uncle or so-and-so's brother, or they have a family tradition and blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. So very good. So I'll roll into my next question, which I think you're more than qualified to handle here. and again, if I'm being ignorant, tell me, because I certainly don't have the giant worldview of the fire service sometimes. But in my travels, the opportunities I've had to teach, I feel like the teaching circuit is heavily, heavily made up of career people. And I'm not saying there's not volunteers out there teaching. Obviously, you are. You teach nationally, you teach on the national circuit. You have training companies. But I think most people are surprised kind of to find somebody with a volunteer background to be teaching, kind of what Sean touched on the beginning, not as a put down, but just to, wow, I never thought about that. So what are your thoughts on that fact that, it is a lot of career instructors, and I find too, what I have found in my teaching is the audience at these classes and these conferences is actually heavily volunteer. So you have a lot of career guys teaching a lot of volunteer guys. And in my experience, I've had to adjust my teaching style, my perspective, because quite honestly, my experience doesn't always line up with the reality that those volunteers are going to face.
It's interesting you bring that up, and that's kind of one thing that, traveling around and people asking me, what shifts do you guys work, or, how many stations do you have? And I tell them that I'm a volunteer with, teaching or taking these classes, and it's mind blowing to some of these people. The biggest thing for me is that I hold myself accountable, and I get that from a background, young in life. I did a lot with martial arts, and I started teaching people at a really young age. And then I went really, really big into diving, and I went super deep into technical diving, cave diving, rebreathers, things like that. So my accountability between the ages of 17 and 18 was to this small core group of guys that we always dove with. And literally, it's life and death. I mean, when you're 300, 400 feet under the water, things go bad. You have to depend on each other. You have to have your skills squared away. So taking that aspect and mentality of where I'm at and moving it over to the volunteer service, I want to continually be better and push myself to make sure that at the end of the day, my crew can not only depend on me, if we're going on a fire, my civilians can depend on me, and I can depend on myself to get out of a lot of bad spots. As you guys were talking through here and everything, and you say you might hurt feelings and whatnot. The philosophy that I live with is that at the end of the day, I would rather be a good fireman than a nice guy. And I piss a lot of people off, but at the end of the day, if they're looking at me and there's nobody I'd rather be going to a fire to up here than with Mike. I want him in the back of the engine. I want him, as my pipe man or throwing ladders or cutting, because I push myself to be that. And the one thing that I've really noticed with that is initially it was tough because I was doing it on my own and I wasn't spreading the word and didn't have this epiphany until a couple of years ago where I'm like, man, I got to share this because I can't be one guy on the fire ground. And I think I take that aspect into when I started doing some like national circuit, going to trainings, FDTN, lots of brothers in battles classes and things like that, and just kind of kept applying myself and just, I can never be too good. I can never be the best. I can always sharpen. I can always be better. I can always work on my skills and find things like that. And then I got very blessed to get picked up with Midwest Fire Tactics and Training. And Nate and I actually met at a conference. We were both at Oath Keepers as students. And I was like, well, where are you from? And he told me, and I'm like, man, that's just down the road. And we started talking, and he picked me up, and that's really led me to where I'm at. And I don't want to necessarily let my scope of practice define who I am because of my knowledge base. At the end of the day, I have a little bit of better time with the volunteer audiences, being able to talk about stuff, being able to relate a little bit more where you're the single guy that's got to go from doing a fire attack to do a vertical vent or whatever it might be. I would like to see more volunteer instructors on the circuit. I think it would be very cool to do. But I think one of the challenges is where we still talk about, I couldn't even put a percentage on it, but I still think that there's a group of volunteers that overwhelms the market that is, well, we're just volunteers. And that kind of kills me because one of the places that I'll literally drive 4 hours to is down into southern Wisconsin where Chief Matt Pieper is. And they have a smaller department than I am, but Matt is a phenomenal firefighter. And I walk into their station and their hose beds are clean, their tools look good. And the very first sign that you see when you walk in that door is volunteer doesn't mean mediocre. And at the end of the day, if you live by that sign, there's no reason that I shouldn't be able to go down and deploy my hose and have water flowing in the same time standard that a career department was or is doing that at. There's no reason that I shouldn't be doing single man ladder operations. It's reality for my limited staffing. And I've kept pushing myself to that point where I got noticed by some of the right people and I got picked up to do some of this teaching. But at the end of the day, I have to push myself hard to make sure that my skill set is squared away because I'm going to be sharing that. And I tell you what, I get super nervous. Like when I talk to people or teach people, I feel like I said, I'm a nobody from nowhere. Like I don't run 1,000 fires in a year. I don't even run hundreds of fires in a year. God, we're lucky to get, oh, I don't know, in a busy year, between 15 and 30 working fires in a year. We have a lot of rescue stuff that we do in the woods. We got a lot of other stuff, but and for our department, we're kind of self-centrally located right on the south end of a county and the north end of another county. We go to a lot of fires for our area, and we go to work. We do work. We do really well, and I try to use those experiences as best I can. But at the end of the day, you got to work harder. You got to be hard. I mean, every week, yeah, we're going to have our trainings, but how can I still go down to the department and do better? How can I still keep doing that? And I don't know that you have that enough from enough of the volunteer service and or enough guys to get noticed because unfortunately, I think with not all, but some on this national circuit, especially the career guys, you have a little bit of ego that comes into play. And that ego, especially with some of these nationally accredited fire FDIC instructors that are the who's who and are getting paid buku bucks to go talk places, man, you give me some food and you pay for my hotel room for a $40 hotel room, I'll come talk to you as long as you want. I'll come teach you whatever you want to know. I mean, I'm happy with that. I'm simple with that, but I don't have an expectation otherwise. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to teach or ask somebody to do something I can't do myself. And if there's other people that are out there willing to push themselves hard enough and get in front of the right people, go to the right trainings, I mean, I would love to see it more. I really would. I think it would be, a really good transition because like we go down to Northern Ohio quite a bit, and the Northern Ohio Fools group down there for the trainings that they put on, it's practically all free for every training. And like we go down there and it just baffles me because you see that just that brotherhood and they want to get better and they want to do more. And again, you look at the percentage of that's all volunteers for the most part down there. I mean, you get some career guys that come in, but man, that's your bulk of your audience, and it's great to see because there's that many people that want to do better and just keep doing good for their community. But I think once you start getting into the teaching, I think maybe people are nervous and a little bit scared because has anybody posted on Facebook, whether it be a ladder throw or how you deploy a hose, and whether you're on engine company resurrection or truck floor training, and just get totally eviscerated because you're a moron? And why would you ever do that? This isn't practical. Why would you throw a 35 by yourself? You have a 35 and a 14 by yourself? I mean, it's crazy. Why aren't we building each other up? Why aren't we talking to that person about like, well, what is your first do like? Why would you ever have to do that? Or why are you even training like that? But no, instead, we're all going to rip each other down. We're all going to be dicks to each other. And that's just the way it's going to be. So, I think that there's a lot of people that just aren't ready for that. And I don't care what people think about me. Clearly, I've got 6 policies about me at my department. But, I mean, that's just I think where especially with the volunteers, they're afraid because they're afraid to get judged by the career guys. And in their eyes, in a lot of aspects, career guys to them are like their miniature heroes. Like it's crazy that we're even having this conversation. I was going through my phone the other day and I read a 2014 scholarship to FDIC that I wrote. And guess what? I used to be one of those guys. Like I was looking at FDIC as the complete apex of everything. And the way that I even articulated everything in that I'm reading it, it's almost cringeworthy to me because it's like, man, I just can't believe that that's where my head was at and my mentality was at compared to where I am now. But then I thought about it. It's like you said, we all started somewhere. We all had big aspirations, big dreams, wanted to do more, wanted to be better. And you know what? I started somewhere. I got on with an awesome group of guys. But at the end of the day, it took me pushing myself. I pay for all my training out of pocket. I pay for all my gear out of pocket. I put myself to all these places because I wanted to go. We didn't have the training budget, or I just got flat out told no. And by being told no, like, no, I want to go. I don't care what it's going to cost. I'm going to go because I'm going to go learn all this stuff and I'm going to bring it back and we're all going to be better for it. So again, what's your level of commitment with it? How far are you willing to drive? How much are you willing to put in? And if your answer is less than what the expectation is going to be, then maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's just not what you're going to be able to get when you put into it. And like I said, it's that accountability, like Sean was talking about. It's that accountability, and what's going to drive that is the passion and holding yourself responsible to it, whether it's to yourself or to your department.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
on,
well
man. Sean, what you got?
No, I was just going to add on that and say, well said. And, without getting too far off topic here, we brought up some good points about teaching and FDIC and somehow getting there makes you somebody. And a lot of people, they make this mistake of, oh, I'm just a nobody. I'm just a nobody. Everybody's got value, right? And we all have something to contribute. I have taken classes from big name instructors that absolutely flat out sucked. Didn't learn a thing, right? And these guys are supposed to be experts and they're getting paid lots of money. And, I don't say that to be negative, but some of the best classes or the best lessons that I have learned have come from somebody that works in a very small department who no one has ever even heard of. You're talking about conferences. You link up with people and you develop those relationships, and picking their brains and figuring out how they do things and tossing things back and forth. That's truly where you learn, right? And I think the problem we face now is everybody is after that celebrity title. Like you mentioned, they want the money to teach and they want to do that. And when you allow that stuff to cloud the reason why you're doing stuff, it's not even organic, right? So I have to wonder myself whenever I go out those places of, hey, how much do you even know about what you're teaching, right? Because we can all have that ability to regurgitate information and throw it out there, but that doesn't mean that we've ever really applied it and truly tested it. So one of the things that I've noticed in transitioning from my time as a career firefighter or volunteer firefighter into a career firefighter is, it kind of takes a lot more effort, it seems, when you're on that career side to get out there and train and do that, because people tend to feel like, well, I met my objective, right? I got my paycheck, I got this, and now I can just kind of like relax and coast through. And when I was on the volunteer side, man, we spent very little time inside that firehouse. We're always doing stuff, driving the area, stretching line, catching plugs, just doing things because we knew that we were being held to a higher standard because of the title that we carried. And I think that we tend to lose that. And when it comes to the training circuit, once you get that name and these people, how often are they actually going out there and taking these classes and bettering themselves, right? And that's kind of bring it all back around is I would love to see more volunteers coming out and doing things and stepping forward and everything, because that title means nothing. Career firefighter, I work for, New York City Fire Department. Great, good for you. Just because you have that title attached to your name doesn't mean that you're any better than anybody else. It's about sets and reps. What are you doing with the knowledge you have? And what are you doing to further advance that knowledge? And who are you surrounding yourself with? And I think that's the biggest thing is if we can get over that career volunteer argument and realize that, hey man, there's career departments that go to 3 fires a year, and there's volunteer fire departments that go to 3 fires a week. All of that has value, and it's there if we could just overcome our own egos, like you said, and start asking those questions and surrounding ourselves with the people who have that knowledge to be able to spread around. So good
The
point.
best thing I've ever heard on that concept, Sean, I had a guy from New York City tell me one time, he said, "What, you don't think we have mutts in the FDNY?" He said,
Yeah.
everybody's got mutts. FDNY's got them, LA's got them, Chicago's got them. Just because we're doing good things overall doesn't mean we have people that show up, sit on their ass, don't train, get their paycheck and go home. So don't let the glamour of a department name fool you. And like you said, there's some no-name fire department that responds volunteer that is kicking ass and taking names, and putting stops on fires and making grabs, and you'll never hear about them because they're, in rural Nebraska or somewhere, right? But, again, going back to the original statement, right? It's the same job. That's all.
Same job. And I've got to be cautious of anybody who's always like, look at me, right? Because if you have to bring that sort of attention to yourself, like you have to throw it out there and seek that kind of attention, the chances are that, it's not really, how am I gonna put this without sounding like an ass? There's a lot of people that pretend, right? There's a lot of people that are like, this is what I do, this is what I'm about. But if you're truly about that kind of recognition will find you instead of you finding yourself, throwing it out there, trying to get people to pay attention to you. And once you start asking questions to those type of people, you can just pick that apart, man, because there's really no learning that could take place from those questions. It's all about opinions and not facts. And it just, that's where I think we kind of get confused with some things is we're talking about, like we got Mike on. Some people may not even heard of Mike, but I guarantee you he has experiences that those people don't. But you don't really see Mike blasting all over social media, like, look at me. But you see other people doing that. And when you meet them, it just, you look at them, you're like, man, you are so full of yourself. And I think that's really what's hurting our fire service more than anything. And it has nothing to do with, hey, you happen to get a paycheck or you devote your time to do this.
Well, you bring that up too, and I'll just add this in real quick, and we'll get on to the next question for Mike. But something Mike said too about the internet, and it's been said we eat our young in the fire service, right? Everybody's quick to just jump on the bandwagon, and part of that is being mindful about what you're putting out there. I'm not saying you got to put perfection out there every time, but if you're doing a training and it's kind of like Kyle says with Incoming Resurrection, right? Like, I know I don't have an air pack on, right? He knows, right? There's a reason for it. But then you watch some other ones, and if you're training with utility gloves instead of fire gloves, I'm sorry, you deserve to get roasted. But the other half of that is that there's a time and a place to roast people, and if you're willing to put your stuff out there, at some point you got to be able to take that criticism back. And the internet is a horrible place for it because we like to put emotion with text that is not there, and that's the blessing and the curse of the internet, right? We're all connected. But we're all interpreting it how we want to, right? And it doesn't always come off right. So I think sometimes people are a little too sensitive with the comments that they get. And we all know in society today, nobody likes to disagree, right? If you disagree with me, then you hate me and I'm an enemy and you're attacking me. In reality, I'm just saying, hey, I disagree with what you're saying, and here is why, based on my knowledge, my experience, and my preference, and take it or leave it. Maybe you get something out of it better, maybe you don't, but I think you got to throw that caveat in there too. I agree with Mike. I think a lot of the time people are just happy to get on the keyboard under their fake, what they get, they got a backdraft guy name, right? That's their Facebook name is Shadow or something, and they want to tell me all this crap about what I'm doing wrong. But if you have genuine feedback for somebody and you're not malicious, and you shouldn't have to preface with this, but I always do, like, hey, I'm not trying to be a jerk. Hey, I'm not trying to attack you, but A, B, C, D, E. And sometimes I had a conversation with somebody the other day. They run all the same color crosslays, and I'm like, hey, no offense, but that seems weird to me. Like, what's the deal? Why are you doing it? And they came back with, well, when we extend, it's easier. We don't have to carry as much spare hose. The color on our knob matches the color on the pump panel, and it works for us. Hey, good points, bro. Rock on with it. That's not what we do, but maybe someday that what it is, and he knew I wasn't attacking him. He even came back like 3 weeks after the fact to update the post. So I just think if you're going to put it out there, be ready for some criticism, but recognize when somebody's being a jerk and somebody's trying to be helpful. So next question there, Sean.
So my next question is, obviously we know, Mark already touched on it, majority of the fire service is a volunteer in nature, but at the same time, the volunteer fire service seems to be in a little bit of a crisis right now, right? It's hard to get members to come and join for whatever reasons. So how have you found a good way to create buy-in and longevity? Because, again, the other side of that coin is a lot of people view volunteering as a stepping stone of, hey, I'm going to put in my time for a little bit because that's going to help me get a career position. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, there's a lot of career guys that volunteer on their days off. So um, I know across the country, it's been kind of something that's been discussed is we can't get volunteers, we can't get volunteers. How are you dealing with that? And what have you found, if anything, that kind of helps bring people to you?
I think that we're going to go back to my discussion about culture. If your culture is that you have a minimum and we just meet the minimum to get by and we don't hold our people accountable, here's the thing. If I'm not held accountable to come to calls, if I'm not held accountable to come to trainings, if I'm not held accountable to come to meetings, then what's the repercussion and what's the bonus for me even being there? I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, if you're not going to push your members to want to be there and have that want, need, and desire to be there, then guess what? You're going to have crap input and crap output. That's just the way it is. So, as an example, by me, we did a full rewrite, boy, I want to say in 2016, 15-ish on our SOPs. And we went and literally we hunkered down. We went from a super old working document and we beefed it up. We put a lot of teeth to it. We had accountability with it. And now it's gotten to the point where we have, like I was saying before, we have increased training requirements. We have minimum training requirements that we upped above that. And at the at the end of the day, we hold people accountable to the sense that straight up, if you're not going to come to training, if you're not going to come to meetings, and we don't see you on calls, we will kick you off. We do not need you here to be a roster number because guess what? By doing that and holding people accountable, there's a line. So if you don't want to be here, hit the road. I mean, we're doing too much important stuff in training, and that's kind of difficult because I know a lot of people are going to say, well, they're volunteers because you can't let them go, you can't do this, it's going to be hard to do that. I understand if you have a small roster, I understand if you need a culture change, and what's difficult is that if you don't have a culture change throughout and you've only got one or two or three guys, it's going to take some time and it's going to suck. But I can tell you right now, with a lot of the stuff that we're doing today, whether it be a certain tool, certain technique, certain hose lay, whether we're doing our bundles or we're, pre-tying our halyards, there's a lot of stuff that, have come up over the years that I brought up 5, 6, 7 years ago, and everybody thought I was nuts. But now today we're doing it. Interesting. It took me 10 years to do things in certain cases, but you know what? The fire service has been around for a couple hundred. 10 years is nothing. If all I got to do is be patient, bide my time, talk to people correctly, and in more recent years I've figured out that if I use patsies, that works a lot better because if it's not coming directly from me and it's coming from somebody else, that seems to go well too. But along with that retention side of things, if you have people from the outside looking in going, man, you look at the involvement that they have in the community, whether it's your fire prevention programs, whether it's giving back to the community, whether it's like for us, we're huge with picnics, we're huge with our mail outs. But like right now, we have a second station going in on our north end. We're trying to privately fund that 100%. So you look at that, we're not affecting the tax base. We're doing it out of the department funds, and we continue to fundraise for it. People love that. And people are going to see us doing that community interface and they're going to go, wow, what are these guys about? Then they see us on calls. Then they see how we operate on car accidents or things like that. And they can see how you're squared away. And all of a sudden you have people that want to keep coming in the door. It's difficult to get that culture change and it's going to take some time. I mean, until recently, we had the same fire chief for 40 years. I mean, nothing against him. He was a great guy. He kept everybody in check and everything. We didn't get a ton of progression until our new chief came in. Younger guy, still goes to trainings, gets dirty with the guys. That's where we started really seeing that progression. And it was having to baby step, having to be political about some things. But eventually we saw it. And that's where we're starting to move in that common direction. And our common goal is to constantly get better, be aggressive, do good things, and just be good firemen. Why is that a bad thing? We can be volunteers and be good firemen too. So, holding people accountable, it's a tough thing, and we are going to see, you know, we're going to see that change where we have these districts start forming, and we're going to have a lot of consolidation. But at the end of the day, I think it's as simple as just the culture. If you have your volunteer houses change the culture, and again, we go back to a different example, like I talked about before, Chief Matt Pieper down in southern Wisconsin. I mean, I drive 4 hours to go train with those guys. It's a smaller department than I am, but man, the buy-in that he has from his people, how the department is laid out, uh, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. It's fantastic. So they exist. These unicorn departments exist that are out there, and you can always, hold your people to a higher accountability. And it's going to take some culture shock, but at the end of the day, the people who are going to buck you, are they really the people that you need there? And that's one thing that's going to be a hard pill to swallow. If you, and somebody said it earlier, you got a guy that's been on 20, 25, 30 years. Have they really been there 20 years, or have they repeated their first year for 20 years? Because I have some of those guys. I have guys that, I know that are officers that they couldn't command their way out of a wet sock. I mean, and it's scary because they got a popular vote in, and that's where they are. And oh my God, please don't be the day that you're commanding stuff, because I don't know if anybody's going to make it out of here. Or they're going to be so cautious because they don't understand fire behavior that, oh, all defensive, we're not. And it's like a room and contents. And it's like, what are we doing here? So, I think that holding those people accountable, having high standards, they are not bad things. But historically, with the volunteer service, especially from my experience in Wisconsin, you have one little alteration of a state law, especially when it comes to increased training, everyone loses their minds. It's like it's the end of the world. How can we send Bob? He's been on here for 30 years. You're telling me his 30 years don't mean anything? Well, we're not saying that. But like, why wouldn't you have the certificates? Why, when you're in an entry level class, wouldn't you take the certified class that's built into the class? Why would you stop halfway in between? Why wouldn't you keep progressing? And that's kind of the way that we've done that. And for anyone who's interested in how to do that, or what our SOPs look like, I'm more than happy to share that and do that if you're struggling with stuff, because it's difficult. And especially going back to those popularity votes, you get a lot of people in there that maybe have a different mindset, maybe have personality conflicts, or how certain things should be. It could be the death of a department, and you could have a healthy roster and all of a sudden lose 8 guys, and now it's like, God, how do we even stay in existence at this point?
Yeah,
So
that's a great point. And I got somebody who wants to speak up on an issue here, about how they have retention and stuff. So we'll get there in a minute. One thing I want to add about the performance standards is, you're absolutely right. At what point do we, on either side of the coin, sit there and say, hey, okay, can you still do what's expected of you to do? I understand that you've been here 10, 15, 20 years. That's all fine and dandy, but are you fit for duty? Because if the answer is no, we've got to get better at trimming the fat. I mean, that's just it. So that doesn't mean you have to fire them, but maybe put them on a plan, right? Or mentor them and coach them, or do something to help bring them back aboard.
reserve member.
There you go.
They're great
Right.
at bringing water. They're great at setting up tents. They are great at driving fire trucks to places.
Yep, but combat, probably not for you anymore, right? So that's one thing I wanted to touch on. And then Michael's got something here of what he uses in his department, and how they can keep retention. So I want to kind of let him expand on that to everybody.
All right, so I'm a retired career guy from New Jersey. I came down to Florida and I actually got involved in the volunteer service. I looked around for a career job. It wasn't really working out for me. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. But I found out that I still wanted to be involved in the service. So the volunteer department that I work in now, I joined really because I just wanted to still be a firefighter. What I found out is that they actually have a pension that they give their members. They qualify if you respond to X percentage of calls a month. there's a percentage breakdown. You have to go to, don't quote me on the numbers. You have to go to X percentage of calls total, and then X percentage of calls at night, and then X percentage of calls you have to make the rig. If you meet those minimums, you get a qualifying year. And if you, after a certain number of years, you vest, and then after 20 years, you get a full pension. I mean, you have people walking away now that are making $1,200 a month in a pension, and that may not necessarily be a big deal to some people, but I'll tell you what, as far as the retention thing goes, I can see people that are staying involved because they know that they've got something to look forward to. So that's something that's not the reason I joined. I already have a pension, but I said that's a really good thing to give back to people. There's an $8 or $9 call stipend that they get. Again, I'm certainly not doing it for that either. I'm not. That's not my motivation. But the pension system, and it's FRS. So I'm very interested to know. I haven't really been there long enough to know how it actually works from the city side. But yeah, it's good benefit for people, for volunteers. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we had in New York growing up too. Was it was called LoSAP. I think Alan wrote in their length of service award program. Same thing. You made X percentage of the calls and X percentage of the training for the year, and they drop money into your retirement. Here in the Southeast, a lot of the departments do either a pay per call, or where I volunteer, if you make your minimum trainings and your minimum, they call it a duty, where you got to go pull. It's a combination department, so you got to go ride with the ride time while the paid guys are there. And I think they give us, it's like $50 a month. So around Christmas time, you might get a cool $600, $500 towards Christmas presents, right? And I'm like you, Chief. I'm not there for the money. In fact, he told me, he's like, well, the first time I couldn't make the trainings because I was traveling too much. I said, Chief, I can't make the training. What I do? He's like, oh, you're gonna lose your stipend. I'm like, you get a stipend? I had no idea, right? It's not. I'm not here for that, And it keeps me in the state pension for the state that I worked in. So
now, LoSAP, because they had LoSAP in New Jersey, is that a defined benefit, or is that they put money into an investment?
I can't remember because I was like 17 at the time, and I really could care less about retirement at that point in my fire service career.
This is a defined benefit. I mean, if you're
Okay.
X number of years, you qualify for a defined benefit that you get for the rest of your life. It's not an investment that fluctuates with the market. So really very progressive as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, that's way different. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Mike, I say this in the nicest possible way, and it's going to come off wrong, but I think it's funny that nothing we've really talked about tonight honestly has anything to do with the volunteer fire service, because everything you're talking about is a problem on the career side too. It's just that there's this, I don't know, misinterpretation that everybody on the career side is squared away and wants to be there and comes in and does what they're supposed to do and, is ate up with it and all that. So, I just think it's funny.
And it's
Yeah,
funny
I'm thinking that too, Mark.
Yeah, and I agree with that. When you look at it and I hear about that, I think that those of us that are within the circles and those of us that follow the pages or go to the trainings and the conferences and things like that, we're very blessed because we don't have to see it on a broad-based spectrum. We all get to kind of collectively get together. We all get to feed off of like-minded people. And for me, to be honest with you, I need those in my life, because for me, I'm loading up the syringe, and that's my motivation that's going straight into my heart to get me through another 6 months, to get me through another 12 months, especially if I'm going through a rough time with haters, whether it be at my department or a different department or things like that, or I'm trying to push through something. It's like, man, I just can't understand why they won't, listen to me on this. I can't understand why we didn't do this 5 years ago. But I think that we're very fortunate that we have that ability, that we can go out and we can interface with these people and talk to all these like-minded people who are sitting there. And I'm watching the videos, everyone's going like this. And, that's the big thing is we're all talking the same thing, but I don't know if anybody's ever cracked the code or going to crack the code on how we can do that across the board. And it's tough because you have such a difference in culture geographically. You have such a difference in what the training regiments are, what the requirements are. And I think it's tough because we just don't have that national push across the board for some of these guys that want to do it. And at the end of the day, you're still going to have haters no matter what you do. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and I know Mark has a topic here that he wants to address real quick, but before I let him do that, we've hit on culture quite a bit, right? And that does drive a tremendous amount of our success or even our mindset on things, right? The thing that we have, two things with culture is one, it could be what happens when nobody pays attention, and it also can bring you great employees as well as it costs you great employees. So having that culture that people can relate to or people want to come work for is super important. Whether that's getting a paycheck or doing it for free, it's super important that nobody wants to come into work and hate their job. And I think that we have a lot of those people that come in and they're like, I don't want to be here. I'm just biding my time. They get hired and then they're on the job, but they're retired. And we got to find a way of how we can spark those people up, because when we get new members in the department, they're the first ones to grab a hold of those new members. Oh, so why are you here? Oh yeah, I was full of piss and vinegar like you once, and I did all those things too. And just because something bad happened to them, or maybe they lost their passion and drive, motivation to do something, that doesn't mean that everybody has to be the same way. And it's very impressionable to those people coming in when they see that, because this is a senior guy who's telling them not to do something, or it's looked at as, I can't be passionate or excited about this job because that's something that we don't do, right? We find terms to give those people, and we make fun of them every single time they do that. And I think that's one of the hurdles we need to overcome, and that's the bad part of our culture, right? We've allowed that to happen. There's nothing better than getting a young, hungry firefighter that wants to learn the job and watching what happens when a good senior firefighter latches onto them and shows them everything. So getting back to doing more of that versus bashing each other for every little thing. It's really about, what are you doing in the fire service? When you retire, what do you want to say about your time in the fire service? Was it a great experience for you? Did you get to do a lot of stuff, or was it just a paycheck? Yeah, I did my time and now I'm out collecting a pension, or I did my time. And I remember when I used to get woke up at 3 a.m. with a pager and go to these calls. I'm over that. And for me, it's about, what did I do with the time that I was blessed to have in the fire service? I think we need to spark that same passion into people immediately. And that starts from their application process. So where we can kind of gauge that, I think, is doing a better job in the interview, doing a better job with the candidate pool. And I know on the volunteer side, that's kind of hard because we might need numbers. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't care about numbers. I'd rather have one great firefighter than 10 that are useless. So do you have anything on that as far as what you guys might do for your performance standards, like entry-level requirements or anything like that you use when you're getting those candidates in? And how do you keep them engaged?
So we'll talk about that, and then I've got a couple things that I want to address in the chat as well. So I think that over time we've gotten better at my department, and I'll just speak for my department. I think that once everybody saw the way that the state wanted to go as far as training goes, the biggest thing, when you bring a brand new person in, they have no conception of what anything should be or should not be. So that brand new person, if you say, hey, you need to go to your entry level 1 and 2, you need to take your certified firefighter 1, and then after that we have these other classes that you're going to go ahead and take for driver operator and things like that, just to make sure that you meet your state qualifications and everything's good to go. What's a new person going to say? Okay, all right, whatever I got to do. Yep, because why are they there? They're wanting to be better there. They're wanting to do that. Now, let's bring in the toxic person. Hey, what do I have to do to be a volunteer firefighter? Oh, God. Back 20 years ago, they just gave us a 6-pack of beer and we drove down the road and we did the best that we could. And, you know, we really didn't get training. They require all this stuff now. So just do these 2 entry-level classes, and that's what the state says is good. So we'll just call it good. Well, okay, I guess that's what I'm going to do then. Well, again, it goes back to that accountability. If those people who are coming in and interfacing with those officers or senior members or whoever might be on your screening committee and whatnot, which we actually have a screening committee. So we have everybody fill out an application. The application is read by the intake screening committee, and then our screening committee will sit down with that individual and ask them questions. Why do you want to be here? These are the basic minimum requirements. These are the classes you're required to take. Here's the SOP book. You're going to have to read through this and everything. And they're given the straight shot. This is how it's going to be, and this is what you need to do to be here if you want to be here. And they have to be given the green light by the screening committee through background checks and everything else to even go to the membership to be voted on. They can be shot down at that point, and the screening committee can say, hey, this just isn't going to be a good fit, which we've done frequently to people. I mean, it happens. Once we get people in and once they start going to stuff, for us, the toughest thing that we're finding is that we need to maintain that engagement through their classes. So they might not necessarily be allowed to go on calls, but like, why else would you want to join the fire department? You want to go on calls. You want to go in the big flashy truck and go to the fires. So the one thing that we do every single month outside of our normal business meeting that we have rescue and EMS training, we have fire training, we have maintenance training, and we have command staff training / meeting. So there's opportunities to keep everybody engaged and see them every single week. And we're able to, you know, let's say you're not an EMS person, come in and be a victim. Hey, we have this huge search and rescue that we're doing to treat, you know, grid search operations. I need X amount of victims. Hey, we're going to incorporate this as a joint training. You know, we've got extrication. I know you're a new person, but why don't you come down and see this, because it's really cool on what we're going to be doing with stuff. And just keeping that engagement factor. Now that you have them there, hey, you know, Sean, why don't you come over here? This is the heavy rescue, and let's go ahead and look through the compartments, and I'll explain a couple things to you so that if somebody yells at you that they need something, you know where to go right away. So now you've created these gophers that can still come to these calls. They can't be in the hot zone, but now you have a gopher that actually knows where stuff is. Start teaching them maps, start making them interactive. And this kind of ties together from EJ talking about with tips on not having like-minded individuals in your department. The one thing that's difficult is when you don't have like-minded people, is that you face this alienation kind of syndrome, and you face this island. And what's difficult is that if you're the one that's getting pushed out on this island, you can feel really alone for a long time. I've been there. I know what you're talking about. And one of the difficult things is that if you're alone on the island, it's really hard when you don't have the support from your own department. If you want to be training more, if you want to be more engaged and more active with things, to bring those other people in, because they look at you weird and they kind of shun you. And this kind of ties into one of the classes that I talk about. It's called Inglorious Bastards, the Shameful Delinquents. And that's what we feel like. We feel like these delinquents because people think that we're weird because we want to train or do more and be better. My best advice with that: go to outside conferences, do stuff like this, go on Facebook, talk to people, find those like-minded individuals that can help baby step you and keep you going with your career, whether you're volunteer or career, it doesn't matter. You can be a career firefighter and be completely alienated as well. Um, so if you start doing that and going to these conferences, it, like I explained before, it's that shot of motivation that kicks into your heart that you can go back to it and deal with it for another 6 or 12 months before you go to your next conference. The one thing that you'd have to do is that you have to, regardless of your haters, regardless of what's going on at your department, you have to smile and you have to keep grinding. So whether you're training on the apparatus floor alone, whether you're throwing ladders alone, whether you're whatever it may be that you're doing, I promise you, eventually somebody will come and be like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, why are you doing it this way? And explain it to those people. It took me a long time, and I'm not going to sit here and try to sugarcoat it that it's going to be a 1 week process. Masking up with gloves on my own. I was the only one in my department that would do that. But guess what? Within the last, I don't know, few months, 4 or 5 months, I just did a department-wide training on masking up with gloves on and why it's important. I mean, that's progress in my book. Now I have all these people who can think outside of the box and go, wow, I have my gloves on. Now I remember how to mask up. I've even got everybody pre-taped on their straps. It took a really long time, but I was slow and methodical on how I kept my approach and just kept doing it on my own. Eventually enough people asked, and who was the person that asked me that mattered the most? It was my chief. Hey, can you show the guys masking up with gloves on, because I've been watching your stuff and I really think that's a good thing. One thing to help push yourself a little bit more: film everything you do, because that is a completely unbiased source. You can film yourself, you can continue to do better and strive for it. And even if you're looking for like constructive criticism, be ready to have a thick skin. But if you've got guys out there that are going to help push you and everything, those are those like-minded people that are going to applaud you for putting yourself out there and showing off what I'm doing and how can I do better and different things like that. And like I said, just kind of be part of the process. It's gonna be tough, but just be patient with it. You're gonna have to be patient with it, and eventually some of the right people are gonna come into play, or you're gonna develop this small contingent of guys in this small contingent group that's eventually gonna keep pushing in the right direction. And I know I've seen him in the chat on here. You want to talk to anybody about that? JD, who keeps commenting on here, is one of my Wisconsin people. JD, it literally just made his shirts that they're the Misfits, and that's their crew name. And he's raising money because he wants to go to more trainings. He wants to do good. So go ahead and copy JD's name on there. Find him on Facebook and go ahead and buy some T-shirts and sweatshirts, because they're raising money on their own so they can keep going to trainings for this stuff, because it's not in the budget to do things like that's awesome. And they're really cool shirts too. But like, there's a career guy who is finding a loophole so that they can keep doing stuff. And why? Because they're committed to them. They're committed to being better, and good for them. That's awesome. That warms my heart to hear. But again, you can do that on the volunteer side, and eventually it's going to take time. And it would be the same thing that I would tell to him. Just keep pushing, just keep grinding, because no matter what happens, those guys know why you're there. They know you're into the job, and eventually you can break down that wall. It's absolutely possible, regardless of what happens. I mean, I have a rescue chief right now, and I love telling this story. I mean, he was down to going on, I don't know, 8 calls a year. And I mean, we're running at the time a few hundred calls a year for first responder calls, EMS medical calls. And that was the big thing with him, is like, he lost his drive, he lost his passion. He was one of those naysayer guys. But then guess what? We put him back into the rescue chief position because of his time vested in and his experience level and everything. Guess who comes on almost every single call? Guess who comes to every single training? Who goes to continuing education and pushes people to be better? Him. And I tell him, like, I'm proud of you. I'm so happy that you were able to turn it around. So guess what? It's possible. You just have to keep pushing, and you just have to slowly keep bleeding that motivation into people. And you have to be professional about it. If you're a dick about it, then they're going to shut right down. But be prepared. If you start doing that, and if you start bleeding into the right people, they may say yes. Be prepared if they say yes. Because if they're like, yeah, why don't you show me how to do this? Have a plan in place. Prepare your plan ahead of time, or at least have something set up so you can be like, yeah, I'm prepared to do that. I can run training. Because a lot of these people don't understand what your energy ball is, and they don't understand how to put it in the right direction. And let's be honest, if you're the type of grinder that I am, whether you're reinforcing me negatively or positively, I'm going to either prove you wrong, or I'm going to show you why you're reinforcing me positively. So I'm going to take that energy and I'm going to grind it in the right direction for me anyway. They just don't know how to direct that. Sometimes some of these chief officers or even line officers are going to say, well, maybe we should let them lead training this time. Maybe we should let them do this. And they'll give you a little bit. So again, be prepared for that yes statement, and be prepared if they're going to let you run with it. Because if you do and you impress them, guess what? You're in, and you're moving forward in a positive direction.
Man, I love that. And the only thing I want to tag on to that is that when you mentioned being on an island, I think something that we all forget as passionate people is that if you are able to flip that coin, you are able to make people being invested the norm. Don't forget what it felt like to be on that island, because you're going to leave some people behind. You don't have to be an asshole to them, because you know what I mean? You're still trying to get them to come to you. You don't have to have that ego and that standoff personality that you hated, when you were the only one out there training. So when you do have those people that aren't getting on board still, you still keep encouraging them, as painful as it may be, because if you turn into what they were to you, right, then you're really no better than them in the long run, in my opinion.
And that's the one thing too. I see that George is on here with another question talking about we've got a problem with people showing up on the volunteer side for calls at all hours of the day. I'll be honest, we're going through the same problem right now, more medical, because especially on the volunteer side, when you're getting paged out at 2 a.m. and it's a lift assist or anything like that, man, your bed feels really warm. But you know what? At the end of the day, you got to keep going out and doing it. George, one thing that I would say on that, even though it's volunteer, considering going to a schedule and maybe taking if you have rescue officers or EMS personnel that are officers, having them lead the schedule and talk about doing different types of shifts where you can hold those smaller shifts accountable to those calls. And if you put it on some type of a rotation where people aren't always going on night calls, aren't always going on day calls, and you have that constantly rotating, that might be something that's a quick and easy fix for that. But at the end of the day, you can't force those people to go to calls, just like you can't force those people to go to training. So especially with EMS, if you're running a ton of EMS, put a certain percentage on it and just say, hey, our new percentages on this is that if you're on EMS, you have to make X amount of percent of calls annually. So again, you're holding them accountable. Some people might lose it to that, or some people might lose it for a schedule. But at the end of the day, if no one's showing up, what do you have to lose? No one's showing up anyway. So you have some ideas, and then again, ask the group, make them a part of it. Why aren't you coming to calls at 3 a.m? I can tell you right now, there's times where it's like between midnight and 5 a.m. I know it's just going to be me and one other guy because people have work or different things like that, or they're working third shift, but we're going to go anyway. And it's just trying to entice those people, whether with a schedule or whatever, just to keep going on calls and doing stuff.
Awesome, good stuff, man. Mark, did you want to bring in the point about being a firefighter and joining to be a firefighter instead of trying to promote to chief immediately?
Yeah, and I think this kind of hits more on the career side, I think, than the volunteer side, so I won't get too deep into it. But as Mike said too, you have people that come around the volunteer department, right, and they're running for these positions in the officer corps, right? Why? Because somebody told them, oh, you get this take-home SUV, right, and you don't have to go in the fire anymore. You can sit in the command buggy, and you get a portable radio, and you're so freaking cool, right? My post today was actually kind of on that topic about how we lack patience in the fire service anymore, and everything's in a big rush. If you read my buddy Scott Hewlett's post the other day, he does multiple calls. He had a post about being just a fireman, right? If you're not writing a test, if you're not on a promotional track, you're just a fireman. So I think a lot of that, somebody has to be a chief at the end of the day, right? And in a lot of ways, we've kind of put targets on the administrative side, I think, and that's still a skill set that's needed, right? Somebody has to get your budget. Somebody has to enforce the rules. Somebody has to talk to City Hall. So I don't think it's right to villainize the position of fire chief because some people are abusing that role when they get there, right? And to me, a lot of it, what it comes down to is, kind of what Mike said about the new guys when they come in the firehouse, right? Well, on the career side, what do we tell kids when they come in the door? Oh, you got everything you needed in your fire academy. You should start studying to be an officer instead of, oh, go take any forcible entry class you can find. Go take any nozzle class you can find, any engine class you can find, go learn how to throw ladders, go learn how to get your mask on. No, it's, oh, you should go get fire officer 2. You should go get instructor 2. Like, I know you've only been here for a year, but you should be teaching other people, right? So a lot of the time we're putting that rush on them and they don't know any better. And then we're also telling everybody, we're so scared to say, hey kids, you don't have what it takes to be a fire chief or a lieutenant for that matter, right? Like, oh, you don't write well, you don't like the computer, you're scared to confront people, and you have a difficult time making decisions. You're not going to be an officer. I'm sorry, kid. So go learn how to be the best firefighter you can be. Go learn how to be the best rescue guy, best paramedic, whatever it may be. So I don't disagree with you. I think that there are a lot of people that have moved up to that role. And I'll tell you, I'll be shameless in mine, right? I thought I was ready for things way earlier than I should have been. And as I achieved those things, I learned very quickly that I was not as prepared and competent and experienced as I once thought I was. And I've paid for that in my career. I'm still paying for that because of the things that I'm finding out that I should have known that I don't know. So that's a very real thing for sure. But I think that's up to us is in our cultures to change. And it all starts with what we're telling the new members and the expectations, and to go with something else that was in the notes about where the change comes from an department. And Chief LeBlanc will tell you this too, right? Change absolutely starts at the bottom, right? My analogy is always, the water boils at the bottom thing, 100% true. But if you don't have some chiefs somewhere up that ladder that are bought in, they're just going to put a lid on it, and they're going to stifle that progress until it boils over and your culture is now toxic, right? So it's not any one person's responsibility. It's not the top or the bottom. It's everybody's responsibility. And if we keep dividing, the top from the bottom, we just keep having these problems. So I would say you want bought in firefighters at the top, just like you want them at the bottom, right? And that all starts with setting expectations and telling people when they're not ready to promote, and that taking a forcible entry class at their local, training club or training group is just as important as taking Fire Officer 1 at the fire academy. It's just all about where you are in your career.
Well said. Well said. Now, Mike, do you see that? Maybe not in your department, but in a volunteer aspect. Chief Martin posted the other day something similar about this, where he promoted very young. He was a chief of the department at like 22 years old. Now he's in charge of command. He thought he knew some things, and over time he realized that he probably wasn't as sharp as he could have been or should have been. So do you see that as an issue in that volunteer side of things, of guys getting in and they take that promotion so young, and maybe they think they're ready for it, but over time they can't seem to let it go, because for some reason, maybe if they realize, hey, this is not for me, or I'm not ready for this, or I was put into this position because nobody else was able to do it, stepping down would look like I'm incapable, and maybe that's kind of like a ding to their ego. Do you see any of those issues on your side of the things?
I really think that everything that you guys said is 100% accurate. And I also think, again, the issue that you have is that when you don't have minimum requirements and it's a popularity contest, it's a free-for-all, because you could have a guy who's going to be the chief of the department that's got 2 years on and might have his training in, but again, oh, this is so and so and he's a nice guy and he's really going to do things. Yes, we need experience. Yes, we need those credentials and everything. But at the end of the day, when we start looking at it from the volunteer side of things, you have to change the way that you're voting. One thing that we're looking at doing now is we have a full ballot system, so that our votes are actually only going to be through a ballot system for candidates that are eligible for promotion. So if you don't meet the requirements of lieutenant or captain or deputy chief or chief of the department, you don't get to run. And guess what? There's the incentive to run. You want to be a fire chief? Go to the SOPs and see what you need to do. And I really think that getting away from the popularity contest and putting some minimum basic classes on what the fire chief entails. I mean, when we just rewrote our job descriptions for fire chief, I mean, we literally said, well, if you're the chief of the department, as far as Wisconsin goes, you should be having every certification that we get up through, at least with Fire Officer 2, all of your NIMS classes, everything like that. And it's funny because as we started narrowing it down, our chief has all of those requirements because he's continued to push himself to take those classes throughout the years. Did he have to? Absolutely not. It was never written anywhere. But again, that's the kind of guy that I want leading the department, because he's still pushing himself and going to those conferences. It's tough because, again, we keep dovetailing back to this culture. That's what it is. And for you to change that and get that change, it's going to be tough. But I'm just telling you right now that if you can somehow get a person who's invested in it, who's got the passion, who wants to be more in the department and get a little bit of experience, let's be real, between experience that you would have and the amount of classes that you would have to take, you're kind of doing that as a tandem type of thing as you're moving up the ladder, if you will. But I totally agree. There's a lot more to being an officer and being a lieutenant or a captain before you bump straight up into a chief's position. I mean, you look at not only the administrative side of things, but what the command and control aspect of it is. And I mean, the last thing you want to be is a soup sandwich on the radio at 3 a.m. with multiple people trapped and extrication needed, and you're trying to coordinate all that. And that might be your first command call. I mean, God, I can't even imagine. That's crazy. One thing that we try to do with our command officers that we have and with our trainings that we do, we try to do different variety of scenarios, and we try to incorporate both our EMS and rescue officers in with our fire officers, so that really you're in command of any scene, and we're trying to give them more experience with that. But again, it's tough because you're going to have to change a whole mindset of a whole group that is still a large percentage doing the popularity votes. And I think if there was a push for some type of a standard for the volunteer service with certifications or whatnot, not only based for just fire or, you know, a basic line firefighter, but hold the chiefs accountable, hold those officers accountable. Because like I said, I had the same chief for 40 years. Like, where are his certifications? God, they were probably on a tablet etched in stone back in the day. You know, at the end of the day, if you're going to want to ride that position, have them held accountable and make sure that they're at least going to those classes and they're still knowing what they're doing. You can have a guy that's been in that position for that long, but how many fires does he command? Is that one of the guys that's showing up to every single fire? Or are your deputy chiefs, captains, and lieutenants the ones that are all running the fire? That's a real thing. And you might not have a chief of the department that ever shows up, but guess what? There's going to be the one day where he does show up and it's going to be just a disaster. And it's like, God, why did we put him in that position? And to the same thing with younger guys too. It's possible. You know, it's tough, and I don't necessarily have an answer for it, but I think that if your own department could slowly do that and you have the right guys that want to change with it. I know for us, we have required I think it's 4-year rewrites on our SOPs and bylaws. So we actually develop committees and we say, what's worked over the last 4 years? What's worked for this? And maybe we need to change this or increase this, or that's those conversations where, hey, the state's going this route, or, you know, we need to have better job descriptions, or we need to do a better job at this. And then you add it in and you have it run for another 4 years. But, you know, at the end of the day, you got to do it on your own, and you got to do it within your department, because that's where it's going to matter.
Good deal,
Absolutely.
man. Pablo, before we get to wrapping up, you were able to stop driving there. What do you got to add, man? Pablo kind of joined us midway, and I don't want him to be a silent partner if he doesn't have to.
That's all good. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I was driving. I was on my way up to pick up my wife from work. She works at the University of Florida, so I'm up in Gainesville right now. Go Gators!
Yeah, you can stop that, but moving on.
On a side note, so just a couple things to just add. Mike, I love all the stuff that you're saying, man. It's a lot of the shit that's going on there's literally no difference. The shit that's going on the volunteer side is the same shit that's going on the career side, brother. That's first and foremost. Second, as far as like people that are people that teach, man, I could care less. I could care less if you work for New York City, Chicago, Boston, the fucking Paris, London Fire Brigade, or whatever the fuck they call it out there. I want to know people. I want to learn from people that go to work. I could care less. Like, if you work for a volunteer department and you know, you go to work and you put as Sean says, sets and reps in and training. You go to conferences, and you know, and I don't care if your first due area is filled with mobile homes every 30 miles. If you go to work, that's who I want to learn from. I could give a fuck less if you work in Midtown, whatever, and you know, you have, you know, up-teen high rises, but they never catch fire. Like, well, what do you know, like it is what it is, you know. Like, I want to learn from guys that go to work, and I want to learn from guys that are passionate about the job. You can fake a lot of shit, but you can't fake passion. That's straight up. So you know, and as far as another thing I wanted to address too, as far as like doing stuff that people might, you know, like bash on the internet, like let's say throwing a 35-foot extension ladder or whatever, or something along those lines. I'll raise my hand. My name is Pablo Jenner, and I throw a 35-foot extension ladder. Will I ever throw a 35-foot extension ladder on a fire scene by myself? Probably not. Will I ever lower a 35-foot extension ladder on a scene by myself? Probably not. Do I know that I could do it by myself? Fuck yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I fucking do it. Because I know that I could fucking do it. And it is what it is until someone else could fucking, like do it. Just do it. Like, what are they gonna tell me? Oh, well, you never have to do. Why are you buddy breathing, or why are you doing a hot bottle change? I'm really into rid operations and hot bottle changes. Oh, well, that'll never happen. Yeah, well, you know what, bro? But I can fucking do it. I know that I could do it, and that just builds confidence in me. That builds confidence. That lets me know that I could do it. Lets me know that I'm comfortable in my gear. So the way that I figure it out is everybody that says, oh, why are you throwing a 35? Why are you doing a hot bottle change? Why isn't that? That's because they can't do it. Because deep down they know they can't do it, and they just like to dim other people's light by making theirs shine brighter, or whatever the fuck the saying is. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on it. Sorry, I cursed like a sailor, boys. Go Gators.
It's all right.
I
You're
love-
only up to 8.
I love
Only
how
8
you talk.
F-bombs. You're doing great.
All right.
Oh, it's amazing. Hey, you got to calm down before your wife comes out from work, though. She's going to want to know what you've been doing sitting out there waiting for you. You're all fired up.
Boys, I'm like 4 reins in right now.
There it is.
9.
All right.
I'm happily sober. I'm wearing a sober as fuck shirt. I don't drink. I don't do drugs, but I curse like a sailor and I drink a shit ton of coffee.
Oh, how I
Right.
miss you, Pablo.
Pablo, you got like 3 more in you because you're only at 10, and we don't call you PG-13 for no reason.
Oh brother. No, I'll keep it PG for tonight, man. But I love this stuff, man. This is the stuff that gets me recharged, man. Honestly, because there's like culture and passion. It's, I think, and I talked about this with Sean so many times. Probably the 2 most hardest things to define is what is culture, what is passion, what is brotherhood. Man, that thing is hard to define. But once you find it, man, you want to protect it, and you want to spread that love to other people. But it's so hard to define. We have, and going back to what you said earlier, Mike, I remember about you said something about in the volunteer side, you have guys that come in and they want the belt buckle, they want the t-shirt or whatever. Brother, we have the same issue on the career side, but we're fighting the same fight, just with different names. You know what it is on our side? People that come into the job expecting the perks of the job before they even have the job. So what I mean by that is, when I got into the profession, brother, I was ignorance is bliss. I had no fucking clue about what the perks of the job were. I had no clue about recliners. I had no clue about the TV. I had no clue about the schedule. I was like, oh, fuck, I think I want to be a fireman, because a buddy of mine that works for the city of Coral Gables was like, man, your personality would probably blend in pretty well with this. So I got into the job and I fell in love with the job. I went to Miami-Dade Fire Academy, and the guys down there beat love into me, and I fell in love with the job before I knew about any of the perks. So the way that I figure it is, right now, we have to fight the issue of, on the career side, of people getting into the job knowing the perks before they love the job. They come in nowadays knowing that we have our secret, quote unquote, is out, knowing that we have recliners, knowing that, you could technically watch TV, et cetera, et cetera. So they expect that shit before they actually know the job and actually have a love for the job. So that's our version of the fight of, like, guys that come in, on the volunteer side, that like, I'm a volunteer. I wear the t-shirt and I have a radio, and I go to the county fair with the radio, like, right here in my ear. That's our version of it, bro. It's the same fucking shit, just a different name, bro. We're fighting the same fight, bro.
Yeah, Pablo, I'm going to touch on that real quick. I think part of that's our fault, though, if we're being honest, because we love to brag in the fire service, right? So, oh, you're a firefighter? That's cool. Oh, man, I got the best job ever. Like, and depending on your character will depend on the follow-up to that statement, right? So, as well as I do, there's a lot of people that like to sit in that weapon of mass destruction all day long, watching TV, eating Doritos, doing whatever it is they do. And that is going to be their canned response to, hey, you're a firefighter, how do you like it? It's going to be, man, it's great. I could take a nap when I want to. I watch TV. I hang out with all my best buds. We play video games. We do all this stuff. That is the difference between working for a firehouse and working at a frat house. Okay. So we have to be careful when we talk to people, the image that we portray to them, because if we tell them all the frat house mentality stuff, what do you think they expect coming in? And then all of a sudden, when you say, no, that's not how this works, they're like, well, what do you mean, man? That's the only reason I'm here. It's a huge shock to them. So it's really about what you're portraying it to be and what you want your image to be.
Yeah.
Rock on, man. So, hey, Eric, did you have a question? I saw your hand went up, man. I tried to unmute you if you wanted to talk. All right, cool. So, all right, Mike, I'm trying to be respectful of your time, even though you're an hour up on us because you're out in that weird time zone thing I keep forgetting about every time we talked about this. But
You're the future, man.
those of us on the East Coast probably have kids to put to bed soon. So, I guess to wrap it up, man, anything else you want to add, any advice you have for the other volunteers or anybody in the fire service, and if you got anything to sell us, where we can find you, groups you want to support, whatever you got to add, man, the show is yours. Bring us home.
I think that everybody really hit the nail on the head tonight with passion, culture, and everything. The biggest thing that I can say, especially reading some of the comments on here and different things like that, regardless of what your battle is, regardless of who's hating on you, and regardless of where you are mentally, don't ever let it stop burning in your soul on why you're here for this job.
Well
we
said.
all know why we're here, and there's absolutely no reason that we should ever lose our passion for it if we don't allow ourselves to. So keep grinding, keep utilizing all of these other people who are on this conference, who are on conferences that you're going to, who are doing these trainings, different things like that. I'm telling you, just keep grinding. I think that that's the best I can say it. Everybody else hit the nail on the head. Anybody wants to find me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, and then you can hit our page up, Midwest Fire Tactics and Training. We do different posts on there. We get around to some different parts of the country with teaching and stuff that you can see us around. We don't often get down to the deep south where it's too hot, but yeah, like I said, we're blessed to do it. We're very fortunate, and we're part of a great group of guys and a great cadre. So we surround ourselves with awesome guys, and we learn a lot. And again, we're students of the game, so you might see us out there and see us grinding with you guys alongside you.
Awesome, brother. I know we all appreciate you being here. I'm gonna end the recording here in a sec. If you've got some time and you want to hang out, usually we kind of have the underground workshop that goes on following the episode. So I'm gonna kill it right now. Again, thank you so much, Mike, for your time sharing with us. I think it's interesting that I kind of saw this going one way, and it's funny how it, like I said before, you're talking about all the same things the career guys are talking about. So I think that's validating for the volunteers and validating for the career guys at the same time. So I'm going to end it, man. Thank you again. Look for an announcement on who our guest for episode 4 will be next month, and a date probably in a week or two. So thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.